Joining me now is the newest addition to the UFC commentary broadcast team. He is, of course, making his commentary debut in the booth alongside UFC lightweight Paul the Irish Dragon Felder this weekend at UFC Fight Night 123, Swanson vs. Ortega in Fresno, California. It is Brendan Fitzgerald here on the program for the very first time. Brendan, I have to imagine you're doing awesome right now. You're at the airport as we speak on a layover in Phoenix on your way to Fresno. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great, man. Fox Sports and UFC kind of rolled out the news yesterday. I had learned about it a little ways back, and it's been tough to kind of sit on it for a while, but I've just been getting ready for it. Super excited to kind of get my full card under my belt. Contender Series went great this summer. I'm really thrilled that they think highly enough of me to keep using me, and here I am in the big show.
Congratulations once again. Super excited, to hear you on the mic this Saturday. Before we talk about, this upcoming card and you getting this gig, I want you to go back and talk a little bit about your background before you got into MMA. Because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you haven't been doing MMA for too long. Well, it was even Contender Series over the summer. And just for anyone listening who maybe didn't watch Contender Series, you did the show, every other week with Paul Felder. And so that was super cool. You, of course, commentating the Contender Series, the first season, half of it. Was that your first time doing commentary for MMA?
Yes, it was. Traditionally my background has been in the studio for you name it. I've covered everything there is to cover. When you get into sports broadcasting, you got to go where the work is. So my first job on camera was in Wyoming. In Casper, Wyoming. So you go up there, and there's not a lot of pro teams, right? And there's, the closest college team is more than 2 hours away. So you're covering high school, volleyball, wrestling, football, soccer, baseball. They got rodeos up there. So I've kind of made my career coming up through small markets, and feel like I've got really good at being versatile. No matter the sport, you got to learn it. You got to learn who the players are. You got to learn what's important. You got to tell the bigger story and tell the audience who the athletes are. So I kind of learned that early in my career. Eventually made my way to Boston, covered the big-time pro teams there, covered a Stanley Cup Finals, went to the Super Bowl when the Broncos lost to the Seahawks in New York in the outdoor Super Bowl in February. And then since then got the call to go to ESPNU. And, while I've always loved college sports, college football, college basketball, coming from Boston, it wasn't right up my alley in terms of what I had been covering, but was able to make the transition there and do well for 3 years at ESPN. So I feel like I've made a regular habit of, doing new things and finding my way in an arena where, I don't have years and years of background, and MMA is the latest one. But I really love it, man. Other sports I've covered in the past, I don't still follow rodeo. You know what I mean? Like I don't follow women's college volleyball. Like, I feel like I'll follow MMA no matter what. I'm a big fan of it, whether I'm covering it or not covering it. I've enjoyed jumping into it with both feet this summer, and just can't wait to keep it going.
You did a great job on the Contender Series, but is it at all surprising that you're now on the biggest stage in MMA? You're commentating the UFC, UFC Fight Night 123, of course. Is it surprising that you didn't really have to go? I mean, you did the Contender Series, but that was still a very short brief of time. You only did, I think, 4 shows, I guess it would have been. Is it surprising to be on the biggest stage this early in your career of covering mixed martial arts?
Yeah, I just think it speaks to what they think of me and what my potential is. Now, obviously I'm on the UFC and I'm on Fox Sports 1. And it's just incredible that they've given me this opportunity. I'm so grateful for it. After a couple episodes of the Contender Series, I felt like they were happy with my work, and I feel like I was happy with the calls, given that, as you mentioned, they were kind of the first time I was doing play-by-play of MMA. So I feel like I found a home, and it's weird. I grew up a fan of hockey and a fan of traditional sports, and obviously, I've seen UFC events on, and I've seen major boxing events, and I've worked in South Texas and covered combat sports boxing and some really good wrestling. But, I just think it's a natural fit. I really enjoy it, and apparently I'm good enough at it in their eyes where they want to see what else I've got. So, after a couple episodes of the Contender series, I didn't think it would be shocking that I would get this opportunity. I didn't know it would come this quickly or in what capacity, but really thrilled with them giving me a shot.
Before they brought you on board officially for a Contender series, so going back a few months, how did they actually find you? Just because, again, that was your first time, covering MMA. It seems like, usually you would think that they bring on a guy. I mean, like, how did they even, become aware of you? You had been working
Sure.
ESPNU. You, of course, at the top of the game in a lot of sport, sports-wise, but not in MMA. You hadn't really done much at all. How did they actually come across you?
I was part of those layoffs for ESPN back in April, and so unfortunately my position with ESPNU was eliminated because they've really cut down on their studio programming. And, I remember speaking with my wife about it. Obviously, nobody wants to get laid off. Nobody wants to lose their job. But, if I was going to be one of the cuts that ESPN made, I think I was really lucky in that it was part of a big newsworthy event. So ESPN had these layoffs, and it was just like they were covered by a lot of people in sports media, and I was one of those people that got let go. And so I just think that, if I had a contract and they just let it expire and I slipped out the back door and I wasn't part of this big layoff event, then I think it would have been a lot harder to kind of get some traction on my next opportunity. I would have just been, one of many that's looking for another opportunity in sports broadcasting. But the UFC saw my name, saw that I was available. I don't know exactly how familiar they were with me before, but I think that, the guys that make decisions kind of do a good job at succession planning and keeping an eye on who's out there and who might be a fit. And so they thought I was kind of good enough to get an opportunity and brought me out for an audition, and I was one of a bunch of people that auditioned for the Contender series and put enough good things on tape so that they gave me a shot this summer.
And I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you right now, but when I watched the Contender series and listened to your work on that show over the summer, if you were to tell me this was my first time talking about MMA in a commentary format, I would not have believed you. You sounded, I think you did a very good job, but not just that. You sounded like you'd been. No, you had been following MMA, you'd been covering MMA for a lot longer than you had been, of course. How has the transition to MMA been?
It's been awesome. I mean, I think, first of all, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And I've had others kind of say things along the same lines that you have, and I'm grateful for the response that I've gotten from the MMA community in general. The transition's been great. As soon as I found out about the audition, I got to work. It was like on Fight Pass, and as a lot of people know, that is a rabbit hole that you can go down for hours and hours and hours. And so, thank God for something like that, because the research that I was able to do in a short amount of time and just kind of getting to know what's important, and getting to know the intricacies of the fight game, to outsiders, to a lot of my friends, to some family members that I have that don't know a lot about the UFC or MMA. There's still that perception out there that it's, the skill level is not as appreciated by the outsiders. And so I was quick to realize that and learn from some people. I did my audition with Eve Edwards, and James Krause was out there around the same time, and so was Stevie Wonderboy Thompson. So, just spending a day with them, watching UFC events and watching fights and just kind of hearing the stories of how things go, that was a great introduction. And then to work with Paul Felder, and then the people behind the scenes at the UFC are so awesome. Like, they do not get the credit that they deserve. The producers are amazing. The coordinated producer, Zach, who ultimately was the first one to contact me, and they are so good at what they do, and they are so good at setting up the on-air team for success. And so, they kind of just walk me through the process, and a lot of it too is just, know the players that you're calling, know the fighters in this case, not players. Know some backstory, know some relevant information about how they fight, who they fight for. And then when the fight's on, get excited, man. I mean, and with it being somewhat of a new thing for me, it's not tough to get excited. I think, some people that it's so familiar to, it's such sport and it's so familiar that they might not go nuts. But, the best thing to do when somebody hits with a big right hand and knocks the guy down is to go nuts. I mean, that's real stuff. And so that's a natural reaction for me. I love that Paul Felder has kind of the same tone and the same response as I do. And so, we've kind of gotten together and we have a good thing going.
I think that's really important what you said about the natural reaction to, say, a big knockout blow. Like, I feel like a lot of fans, I mean, that's what fans expect, just because it's sort of, it's the norm, among MMA commentators. But also, I feel like when, sort of a new guy comes in, sometimes I feel maybe, this hasn't been a challenge for you, it seems, but it seems like it would be challenging to have that reaction and make it a natural thing, just because you don't always get that, like, covering other sports. Like, a huge dunk in basketball, sure, you're going to get a reaction, but it's not like a life-changing knockout, and it's just not on the quite same level. And I think that's a big thing here, and why you sort of seem like a natural fit, and seem like you've been doing this for a lot longer than you have been, because you do have that natural reaction, unlike a lot of people.
Yeah, and a couple of things. I mean, I assume you're a hockey fan up there in Winnipeg, and I grew up playing hockey, and I grew up going to hockey games. And, it took me a few years when I was a kid to realize, like, why does everyone stand up when the fight's on? You stand up when a goal is scored, but it's just like, two guys drop the gloves, and what does everyone do, man? They stand up, and they go, oh, and they cringe, and they, it's real stuff. And if you see somebody in the street or at a bar or something throw down, you're going to have that same reaction. It's energy, it's raw, it's real, and it's one of the reasons why I love the sport so much. And then the other part of being able to have those natural reactions to it and kind of put myself out there is that, I feel like I'm prepared. And I've covered other sports in the past. I mean, like I said before, I've covered a bunch of different things that you're not an expert in, but you got to sound like an expert, and if you're not as prepared, you're going to be hesitant, and you're not going to want to have too big of reactions in one way or another, because if you're fearful that you don't know the sport well enough. And I feel like this summer I've put in the time, man, and like I said, I really love it. So, I don't have years and years and years and years in a sport like this yet, but that's, everybody starts somewhere, and, if you're prepared, then you can do the job well. And I think that's a big reason why I've been able to do it well so far.
After the Contender series was over in August, after the 8th show, after your 4th show, did the UFC give you any hints that they would bring you on for a UFC card? Did they give you any sort of hint like that, or were you sort of just left in the dark and, with your fingers crossed?
They have hinted at, some more work. That, they're in a different position, and I don't want to say too much because I'm still the new guy at the UFC, so I don't want to say too much. But, they're in a position now where, the future of the UFC and where the content is going to be is, it's up in the air past next year. That's been written about, and there's no secret to that. So, but they've been nice. I mean, they didn't just let me get on a plane and go home and, let me sit by the phone for the next 3 months. They have kept in, they kept in steady enough contact. They made sure that I knew that they appreciated what I did this summer and that they'd like to continue working with me. And, the terms of that were not set in stone at the end of the show on August 29th, but I had a feeling that, I'd be getting a phone call with them in the coming months, and it wasn't too long. They kept me in the loop as to the possibilities, and here we are. I'm getting set to get on a plane to Fresno in a few minutes.
When did you actually find out you'd be working the Fresno card?
I can't remember. I can't totally remember that. I mean, within the last 2 months, I've kind of had a crazy personal situation where I was dealing with an issue at my house. I was living in the Charlotte area with ESPN, and long story short, we had like a mold issue in our house, and my wife and I and our 2-year-old son, we had to pack up our whole house and move, and we were kind of like, where should we move? And So we stayed with family for a month in between, kind of figured out our next step, and then we actually decided to move to Las Vegas because of my, kind of connection with the UFC, and we'll see if it turns into more. But we're like, we got to go somewhere, and I've got something with the UFC, and that's all happened. So my life's kind of been a whirlwind, and things are now just settling down. So I can't tell you exactly when the Fresno thing happened, but, within, I want to say 6 weeks before the fight, 2 months before the fight, somewhere in that.
Right, you've had enough time to prepare. It's not like they called you up last week and said, "Hey, Brendan, want to come down and call some fights?"
Yeah, no, this is not John Anik missing weight, and I needed to step in on short notice. This is, they planned it. They had this schedule, and obviously this is such a busy time for them since, what is this? I mean, I think Winnipeg is like the 10th show in 9 weeks or something like that. So, they had their ducks in a row before things got super busy, and I was just thankful that there was an opportunity for me to get in on one of these.
Do you have any idea if this will be a semi-regular thing, or does that really come down to how well you perform on Saturday?
I assume that this is my first show and won't be my last show. But, I think ultimately it's just you got to do the work. You got to do it well. I mean, ultimately I can be as nice as I can be to all the people at the UFC, and I can be as awesome as I can with the fighters and shaking hands and, being friendly around everybody. But ultimately, like, I got to go on Fox Sports 1 and UFC Fight Pass on Saturday, and I got to knock it out of the park because there's a lot of other good people that do the same job. And there's a lot of other people that want the same job. So, I take it really seriously, and I hope that it's not a one-and-done situation. But ultimately, it's going to depend on my performance, get my first full card, kind of a lot of eyeballs on it, and just do well enough so they have to have me back.
Now, the UFC has brought on a bunch of new broadcasters and commentators, even just in within the calendar year. Of course, Todd Grisham started quite a bit earlier than you did. He's done a few shows since the beginning of 2017. I think his first was in February. Even on the color side, Daniel Cormier, Dom Cruz have been in a regular spot. Paul Felder, of course, started working. He'll be working with you. He also did a show recently with John Anik. And of course, the other play-by-play guy for the Contender series, Dan Helly, who is doing the every other show, where you were doing, I guess you started week 2 and then all the way to week 8. Do you think they're just mixing it up just for fun? I think it's good to, hear new voices, see new faces. I love John Anik and Joe Rogan, but I think mixing it up is always a good thing. Or do you think this is sort of like almost as if it's an addition? Do you think they're looking for one man out of, you, Dan Helly, Todd Grisham, and they're looking for sort of the best of the best out of a handful, and they're going to sort of give who they feel the best is a more regular spot, say, in next year?
I don't know. I mean, that's something that they, probably wouldn't answer, but could speak to more than I would. As I was told, well, obviously the Contender Series was new, so they needed new talent for the Contender Series, and so they decided to give me and Dan a shot for that. Todd got on with them earlier this year. Apparently they needed, another announcer. Obviously, Goldie left, or Goldie, was not around for this year. So, as I was told, UFC, they're not looking to get smaller. They're looking to expand. And so with that comes more roles for every job that they have. There's a ton of fighters. There's more fighters than they've ever had. So, I don't view it as a tryout between me and Dan and Todd. And, John, I think, is pretty set as their number one guy right now. I don't view it as a tryout. I just view it as any smart company in any role has a succession plan and is ready for anything that might happen and looks for good people no matter the job. So they had opportunities, and it's not like they're just on a freewheeling hire spree, I don't think. If they had opportunities this summer where they needed some people and they wanted to find some good people, and I think the goal of that was to find people that they could kind of use for that and use for bigger things. So we'll see.
What are your emotions going into your first show? Are you nervous? Obviously excited. Anticipation, of course, all around. What are the main emotions you have going in?
Man, I'm excited, man. I'm not really nervous. I feel like the Contender Series is such a good vehicle to prepare me for something like this. I mean, it was only 5 fights, and it was every other week. So, preparing for 10 fighters per show is certainly like a good dip your toe in the water. And then you look at their homework for something like this, and it's like, all right, 26 fighters, here we go. So, it's a longer day. It's a longer card. It's a longer trip. I'm flying there now instead of the Contender Series was, pretty simple in terms of getting the day before and knock it out. But, like I said before, like if you're prepared, then, there's nothing to be nervous about. And, obviously I think in a lot of cases, some people in this position might say, I hope I don't say anything bad, or I hope I don't flub anything, or I hope I don't say anything stupid. But, the more you think about that, the more it's likely to happen. So I'm just thinking nothing but positive thoughts. I know I've done my homework. I know I have a couple more days to really tighten all the bolts down, and I'm going to get out there, and Felder's going to be there tomorrow, and we're going to watch some fights and probably order some pizza in the hotel room. He can eat pizza now after he gets the win last week. So we're going to be all set to go, and I just can't wait.
How great is it for you just to make you a bit more comfortable? Not that you really need it just because you are a veteran broadcaster, but I would imagine this helps. Having Paul Felder, the person you worked with on the Contender Series, working with him for your first UFC show. Interestingly, they gave you paired you up with the same guy for Contender Series in UFC, but for Dan Hellie, this past weekend, he made his debut commentating, and he was actually working with Cormier, not Yves Edwards. What are your thoughts? Is it beneficial to be working with the same guy, and does it make you more comfortable, for your UFC debut, or does it not actually matter that much?
No, it'll be a good thing for sure. I've met DC a couple times now, too, and I wouldn't have had a problem working with DC. That guy's a pro. Like, he's done it before, and he's one of their top voices. He's on their UFC 217 team. So the guy's been in front of the camera, in front of millions and millions of people all the time, both inside and outside the octagon. So, but I do think that it's going to have, an extra little nice element that I am with Paul Felder, and that we know each other's game. And what made it so great this summer was how comfortable he is on camera because of his background. He majored in theater in college. Like, the guy is, used to be in front of a camera and talking and having natural reactions and really knowing how to entertain, really, because that's what we're there to do. So, and it's an art. Like, you got to perfect it, and he already is there. For a guy that really did his first true sports broadcasting work this summer, the guy is such a pro. And then, to just be able to hang out with him and hear about the fighters that he knows, hear about his experiences, but then just, him going through the battles and still being a fighter, it's really nice. And, we became fast friends. So I'm excited to go out there, spend a few days with him, and, I think we're going to give it a good effort this week.
I hear a boarding call. Are we still got a few minutes?
That's not me, man. I got like an hour.
Okay, perfect. We're not going to go for another hour, but I don't feel too rushed. Talk me through your preparation for the card. What you've done already, what still you have to do, and not so much. Obviously you're researching all the fighters. You got to know, what they do, where they're from, the basics and background info as well, but. As far as your actual system goes, because I imagine every play-by-play guy, is different. Do you write notes with, pen and paper? Do you type them up? Do you study as much as do you try and memorize certain things? How is your system for prep going? And how does it
I'm
work?
A computer guy. I don't go pen and paper, man. Anik had notes that he hand wrote on note cards for all the fighters. I saw him at 217. And, Anik kind of walked me through what he does. And it was super helpful. He's been really nice, too. I talked with him on the phone this summer before I did Contender Series. And you're right, everyone has their own system. So, what I did is I took the 26 fighters that I had. I made a computer file for all of them. Kind of just, one, kind of a 4-box on a page. And, in the 4 quadrants, it's like, background info, their fight history or their most recent fight history, kind of their stats, their finish rate, and their specialties and things like that, and then their scouting report. And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts. Up top is, the tail of the tape type of information that's not going to change, that you just want to glance and have. And then, I read as much as I can on each fighter, and I listen to interviews as much as I can on each fighter. And, I was able to talk to them on the phone, too. A lot of them from they're on Fresno checking in. Spoke with them on the phone yesterday. I'm going to speak with a handful of them more tomorrow at the hotel, I believe. And, if you're just able to ask them questions, you can get so much by just talking to them for 5 minutes. You can, because really when the fight starts, you got to call the fight. And I don't like over-talking as a play-by-play guy. I like to kind of let the action breathe and let the fight tell the story. But, if somebody shoots in for a takedown, you want to know if they wrestled in college and where they wrestled. Or you want to know that they've been really working on their takedowns. And you can do that just by talking to them for a few minutes. You can do it by internet research. And, so that's what I've been doing, kind of made a file on each fighter. And then, when it gets closer to showtime, you kind of buckle down on the formats and everything and how the show is going to go and the scripts that you're going to have and how you're going to lead to all the elements in the show throughout the night. But, that's kind of tightening down more as we get closer to Saturday night. Before that, you just got to know these fighters inside and out so that a lot of it you can commit to memory. And, anything else that you might need is right there in front of you.
I got to ask you about the pronunciation of fighters' names. I know John Anik, more than anybody, is a master of this. He has all the audio files ready to go, and he nails them every time. He makes sure they're picture perfect. Are you that adamant about it? I mean, everybody has to be, but are you that not silly about it because it's not being it's serious, but are you is that sort of I don't know. Are you the John Anik? Are you John Anik's a copycat as far as pronunciation?
Well, and it's like this is not to take anything away from John, and John is very good at it. He is so good, and he is right on point, as you said. But this goes back to what I was saying about the UFC behind the scenes people that don't get enough credit. I mean, those audio clips that we get, that's the work that the team does behind the scenes to make sure that these fighters are presented the way that they want to be presented. Because, as we all know, without the fighters, we have nothing. So you got to be the best to the fighters, and you got to really present them how they want to be presented and in the best light possible. It's disrespectful. I mean, to say anyone's name wrong. If I came on your podcast and I called you, something other than Nick, you'd kind of be like, what the heck, man? And if you came on and called me Brandon, which happens a billion times, believe me. But, it's just like, hey, be a professional, know your stuff, and that's for any sport. And, I think you do have to make it a priority, though, because especially these international names, we're dealing with people from all over. And, Brazil as well is so different in their name pronunciations from similar names that, say, come from Mexico or Spain or Latin American country or something like that, So, Davi Ramos will look like Davy Ramos this weekend, but he says it Davi Ramos. And so you got to say it how he says it. That's his name. So, I focused on that. I hope for no flubs on that. And I've been practicing it, and they let it be known that it's important to the fighters, and it's important to the broadcast that everything sounds the way it should.
The UFC has, started using the three-man booth a bit more often this year. We've seen it. I know Joe Rogan and Anik and Brian Stann, before he left the UFC, did one, I think, together, I think, over the summer. Cormier, I want to say Cormier, Rogan, and Anik has done a bunch. Is that something that you would like to do? Maybe not right away, just, so you get a bit comfortable, but is that something you feel would be okay? I know Anik has found a bit of trouble with the three-man booth.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't spoke with John about that aspect of things. I'll just put it to you this way. I mean, I'm not gonna say what I'd like and what I wouldn't like to do. Obviously, if there's three people, there's the same amount of airtime as three people. There's only one basketball on the court, so you gotta share the ball a little bit more in that situation. But I'll say this: if I'm in a three-man booth, I'm doing pretty well because they usually reserve three-man booths for big events. And so, if I got Joe Rogan next to me on one side and Dominic Cruz on the other side or something like that, then I'm not going to say that's a bad thing because that means that I'll be doing my job pretty well. So, I don't have a problem with the three-man booth. I would, it's up to them in terms of how they want to present the broadcast. And, they know more about the business than I do. I'm happy to play my role and do it the best I can, but, I'm not one of those on-air guys that calls my own shot or gets upset. It's like, you tell me how we're going to run the broadcast, and I'm gonna knock it out of the park the best I can with my job.
Now, I'm sure you know this more than I do, but are you ready for the criticism? Because no matter how good you do on Saturday, you go on Twitter, you search in your name, and you're bound to have a few haters. On the biggest stage, UFC commentating their show in Fresno. How important is it as a commentator to first have thick skin and just be able to deal with that and not take anything personal? Because there's a lot of idiots on the internet.
You said that, not me. You said that.
Yeah, I did.
It's part of it. I mean, I was at ESPN, and I every once in a while you'll say a stat wrong or you'll mispronounce something, and depending on the fan base, they'll let you have it. But it's like the way I've always dealt with that is if you engage them, then a lot of times they're fun. Like I don't know what it is. Like some people be like, oh, this klutz said this wrong, or he doesn't even know what he's talking about. And if you just fire him a line that says, hey, man, yeah, sorry about that. We all make mistakes. I've found that doing that will get a positive reaction like 9 times out of 10. And I never take anything personally. I was in my 20s once too, and I would sound off on a ton of people, broadcasters and whatever. I thought it's just like you just spout off. And a lot of people do that on Twitter because it's an anonymous platform, or it can be an anonymous platform for a lot of people. The thing that I like about it is that people are passionate about what they're watching. It's better to have reaction than, people not caring about anything. So it's cool to be on a show or a broadcast where you have a lot of people that care a lot about it. And, I hope I get more good jobs than you stink. But, I was a little disappointed at all this, reputation of MMA Twitter. And then this summer, I tell you, I didn't get a lot of hate. Like, I feel, and I was like, man, I don't know. I know I'm not that good, but I didn't get a lot of hate. For the most part, it was positive. So we'll see what it is coming up with a much bigger platform on Saturday.
Yeah, bigger audience, so perhaps more likely to get some people not happy. But yeah, I mean, it definitely any of it really isn't actually deserved, and you of course know that. Let's talk a little bit about the fights. The main event is a featherweight fight, pretty important. Number 4 versus number 6, Cub Swanson taking on the rising star in Brian Ortega. Do you look at this as one that could be the fight of the night on Saturday? What are your sort of generic thoughts? I know you can't pick a winner, but just sort of give me a spiel on sort of both fighters in the matchup.
I mean, I think any main event should be circled as a fight of the night candidate. It's just you just having that level of fighter just means that you have the ability. Now they also have more to lose than some other guys on the card, so maybe they're not as reckless, and they're obviously veterans and experienced. But you got 2 top 10 guys, and another win might get him a title shot. In the case of Cub, another win probably certainly going to get him a title shot. Depending on what he does. And then Ortega, it's like he might have one more win to get, but these are 2 big stars in the game, man. I'm thrilled that I get to call the fight, and especially with how they fight. Cub is obviously known for being explosive and creative and just throws strikes from all corners. 2 fights of the night, his last 2 times out. And Ortega, I think he got fight of the night in the summer when he was at 214, and he stood and banged with that guy, and then, they went down and he choked him out in like 5 seconds. I mean, he is super impressive, and I think I'm looking forward to it, as a lot of people are. Like, we know what Cub Swanson has. Like, he is a very good fighter that's been in the game for a long time. What does Brian Ortega have, and is he at that level yet? And that's why this is going to be such a highly anticipated matchup, because you want to see where Cub is, and you want to see where Ortega is relative to the division.
Putting you on the spot a little bit here, is there 1 or 2 other matchups that stand out to you that you're looking the most forward to as a fan, from a fan's perspective?
Jason Knight's always fun. The guy's like, on the microphone and in the octagon, the guy's fun. And, Mowgli, who he's going up against in the co-man, is good. He's an exciting fighter too. Because I was involved in the Contender series, really interested to see Benito Lopez and Alex Perez, those two guys, and it's quite so close to home for them. Alex is from like 45 minutes away, and Benito Lopez, Team Alpha Male, so they're in their backyard and they're making their UFC debut. That's going to be really cool to see. I think we got great fights up and down the card. Marlon Moraes and Aljamain Sterling. I talked to Aljamain Sterling on the phone yesterday, and I talked to Marlon Moraes too. I think that fight's going to be awesome. I really do. It's a card that's stocked. I really do think so. Eric Anders is a beast. I mean, that guy might. That guy could send anyone to the hospital real quick. And Trevin Giles, too, who's on, the Fight Pass prelims, I think. Man, that guy went up a weight class this summer, and he just destroyed a guy. And so now he's at 185. So, a couple of names to watch out for on this card for sure. I mean, up and down, it's going to be a great fight.
Outside of broadcasting and now MMA, I'm sure, with you doing prep for this card for the past, 6 to 8 weeks, as you said earlier, you haven't had a ton of free time, but, when you do have a bit of off time, anything specifically you like to get up to, any sort of outside hobbies? What are you doing when you do have a bit of free time?
Well, I have a 2-year-old, so there's free time right there. That kind of takes it up. But, so my 2-year-old son obviously takes up a lot of that time with us because I'm either preparing or I'm helping my wife out with him and stuff like that. And as I said, we moved kind of recently, so still kind of getting settled into our pattern of things. But I grew up playing hockey. I'm a big hockey fan. I'm thrilled that Vegas got hockey just in time for me to move back there. So got to get over to a Golden Knights game, got to put the skates on again and get out on the ice. I golf when it's warm out. As much as I can. And like I said, 2-year-old, it's like you only have a certain amount of free time. So I'm really waiting for him to be able to get on the skates, pick up a golf club, and get out there and do that. But, watching sports and, just kind of spending time with family, man, that's what I'm all about these days.
Awesome, Brendan. Well, we're certainly looking forward to your commentary debut for the UFC at Fight Night 123 in Fresno, California. Best of luck to you. As I said, super looking forward to seeing what you have to offer for the UFC after a great stint on the Contender series. Before I let you go, just let everybody know where they can find you on social media and any shoutouts, thank you, anything you got to plug. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't have anything to plug. I'm not that big yet, but, I'm on Twitter at Brendan Fitz TV, and I'm on Instagram at Brendan Fitzgerald, but, that's a lot of pictures of my kids. So, probably Twitter is really the most relevant thing to get me on.